Hello and welcome to another episode of the High Danger Hockey Podcast. My name is Emma Miller, and there's been a lot of focus on the NHL teams that have made big, splashy off-season moves so far. But we haven't really talked yet about the sleeper teams for 2025-26. There are a handful of clubs across the league that I believe have a real chance at making the playoffs that aren't necessarily getting the recognition they deserve. So, who are the underdogs entering the upcoming season? We're going to be taking a look at those teams today, and let's get right into it. So welcome back. For those of you watching on YouTube, you may notice a couple of changes to my filming setup, and for those of you listening, you might hear a big difference in quality because I have got a brand new microphone here, and it changes colors, and it's super cool, and I love it. And I also have a new backdrop hanging up. I've got some new lighting, so I am making some upgrades to my little living room studio here. And not only have I made some upgrades, but there are NHL teams across the league that have really bolstered their rosters for the upcoming season. And there are a couple of clubs that I think have really been flying under the radar to this point that will continue to fly under the radar as the season gets underway in just a couple months now. We're 1 month away from preseason hockey at long last, and 2 months away from the start of the new campaign. So that's all very exciting, and I think there are a lot of reasons to be excited about these three clubs we're going to be discussing today. So without further ado, let's get started with the Anaheim Ducks, who I think might see another big jump in the roster this year. In 2023-24, they broke an unfortunate franchise record for the most losses in team history with 50 L's across the season, and they made a really big jump in the standings. Went 35, 37, and 10 this past season, and I predict we see another jump in the standings that might push them close to playoff contention a little sooner than some people might be expecting. Some big additions to the team so far this offseason have been goaltender Peter Mrazek and forwards Chris Kreider and Michael Granlund. And the biggest problem for the Anaheim Ducks this past year was goal scoring. So I think bringing in Kreider and Granlund are two additions that are really going to make a difference as far as hitting the back of the net more. Kreider scored 22 goals in this past campaign, despite dealing with some really significant injuries. He had a foot injury that got re-aggravated at one point. He had episodes of vertigo, so his season was a little bit limited, and he still was able to produce 22 goals. He is somewhat of a power play specialist. He's the guy that's going to be getting in the face of opposing goalies. He's really efficient at screening in front of the net, and those are all qualities that the Ducks were sorely lacking in this past campaign. Meanwhile, Granlund had another really efficient season. He started off on the San Jose Sharks and produced offense at a consistent rate despite how poorly that team performed. And then the Stars acquired him mid-season, and he was a really nice rental for them in this playoff run. When he joined Dallas, he had 21 points in 31 regular season games, and then he followed that up with 10 points in 18 playoff games. And he's averaging about 17 minutes time on ice per game. So he's playing a solid second-line role and producing at a consistent output. And those things bode really well for Anaheim. Once again, they finished 30th in the league in terms of goals scored, and they had a terrible goal differential of -44. And it's important to note that they did lose Trevor Zegras in a trade, and they got Ryan Poehling in return. And that's not necessarily an upgrade on the front end, but I do think Kreider and Granlund were good additions to make. And I think bringing in Granlund and Kreider is really gonna accentuate what they already have in Anaheim, which is young guns like Cutter Gauthier and Leo Carlsson. Gauthier is only 21 years old, Carlsson is only 20, yet both of those skaters produced 20 goals this past season, and they actually finished third and fifth in scoring on the team, respectively. Although it's important to note that they had 45 and 44 points. So the fact that they finished that high on the team in scoring is a testament to the lack of offensive production from the team as a whole. But the Ducks should be feeling really confident about their roster at this point. They're bringing in those veteran additions to help complement the younger guys and bring in a more leadership role. And on the blue line, they also have a lot to be really hopeful about and optimistic about, especially someone like Jackson Lacombe, who is such a bright spot offensively and defensively for them. He produced 43 points in 75 games. He's only 24 years old. And the Ducks actually have 5 defensemen under contract right now who are 25 or younger. So this is a roster that's still learning. And with the guidance of guys like Radko Gudas and Jacob Trouba on the blue line, plus the additions of Kreider and Granlund up front, I think that's a really solid blend of older and younger talent. And I think that that's really going to carry the team a little farther than some people might expect. And I do think they end up contending for a playoff spot. As far as goaltending goes, I do think there's a little bit more of a question mark in that respect. Lucas Dostal is a phenomenal young goaltender. He is ready to take a big step forward in his 3rd season as the true starter for the Anaheim Ducks. He had a .903 save percentage this past year, despite having a goals against average above 3 goals per game. But let's not forget, the Ducks were not good in terms of keeping the puck out of their own goal. So you can't blame that 3.10 goals against average on Dostal alone. You have to take the context into consideration as well here. But the fact that he had a save percentage above 900 despite that, and despite the sheer volume of goals allowed by the team in general, is really a testament to his skill, his pure skill level, and where he is going to be going in the upcoming seasons. I think the team has really bought in to Dostal, and I think that that's for a good reason. I think he has earned that recognition, and he's earned that spot as a starter, and he provides a lot of optimism for the team. Now, they did trade away John Gibson, who was a franchise staple for many years, but he was kind of on a downward trajectory, so to speak. And I will say in 2024-25, Gibson did bounce back quite a bit with a save percentage, again, above 900. But the previous couple of seasons, he was in the 880s in that respect. And that's not great. It's not great to have an aging goaltender that you can't rely on to win games. So Mrazek is kind of a one-for-one replacement for John Gibson. And is that an upgrade necessarily? I don't know. That's kind of yet to be seen. Mrazek at this point is a little bit past his prime, that is for sure. But in his limited run with Detroit this past season, when he returned to the Red Wings, he did put up some good numbers. Granted, it was only 5 starts. That is a very small sample size, so you can't use that necessarily as a jumping off point for how he's going to perform in a full season on a team that's worse than Detroit was this year. However, he had a 2-2-2 record, a .902 save percentage, a .249 goals against average, and a shutout in those 5 appearances. And that's compared to some really lackluster numbers with the Chicago Blackhawks. Once again, another struggling team, so it's really hard to get a good feel for what Mrazek has left in the tank after spending several years with the Chicago Blackhawks, who have been bottom feeders for that entire time. However, I really do think that his very brief stint with the Red Wings shows that on a slightly better team defensively, he still has the potential to be the guy that they turn to when Dostal needs a rest. So Mrazek up in the air as far as whether or not he's an upgrade over John Gibson, because again, Gibson did bounce back somewhat this past season compared to previous 5 years. But all that's to say, I think the Ducks have targeted the problem of goal scoring, specifically depth scoring, and that middle 6. I think they really targeted that by adding Kreider and Granlund, who both are going to be able to contribute on the power play as well, and that's huge. They can get offense from the blue line. Jackson Lacombe, again, 24 years old. He's on the up and up. He's already proved that he's capable of racking up almost 50 points in a season, and I predict that that increases as the Ducks' overall goal production increases this season, as I'm expecting it to. So a lot of people are going to be sleeping on the Ducks this year, and I don't necessarily blame them for that, but I do believe that this team deserves a little bit more respect to their name than they're currently getting, and I really think they might surprise a lot of people during this upcoming campaign. Moving right along, I am really excited about the Calgary Flames and what they have in store for us this coming season. They were so close to making the playoffs last year. In fact, they missed the playoffs on a technicality on a tiebreaker with the St. Louis Blues for that final wild card position. So they had the points, they had everything they needed to make the playoffs, and they just missed it. And something really notable to me about their record from this past year is they had 14 overtime and shootout losses. So they win just one of those games in overtime, and they have punched a ticket to the postseason. 96 points, and they missed the playoffs. That's kind of absurd. I mean, they're playing in a really tough division. That Pacific Division is kind of jam-packed. The whole Western Conference is really competitive. So they struck a little bit of misfortune. Losing all of those overtime games did them no favors. But the Flames did so many things right this past year, and I really think that they are going to make the playoffs this upcoming season. And I think a lot of people probably have the same opinion, but I don't think that people are looking at Calgary and saying this team is going to go on a deep playoff run, and I think there's a possibility that that does happen. To close out the season, they went 11-2-3 down the stretch, and I think they looked so strong in those final 15-16 games, and there are a lot of bright spots on this roster. And my personal favorite player that I think is going to have a tremendous rookie season and a tremendous breakout year is Zane Parekh. Now, I have been pumping this guy's tires for a little while now, and I have a really in-depth article on Puck Pros that goes into all of his qualities as what I think he is going to grow into as an elite defenseman. So if you're interested in learning more about Parekh, go over to Puck Pros, check it out. I highly recommend that. I worked very hard on that article. I think he's really going to be a player to watch, and I think he's going to be a difference maker for Calgary. He was the 9th overall pick in the 2024 entry draft, and he is just a really phenomenal, cerebral skater to have on the blue line. He's very young still. Fun fact about him, he actually graduated high school early and started taking classes at the University of Toronto when he was 17. So this guy is a smart player on and off the ice, and there's a lot to be said about that. I found that to be very interesting. His skating and edge work is just so smooth. He makes it look so easy, the way he glides around the ice. And really, his creativity is one of his best aspects. I really think his brain is his strongest attribute. The way he is able to analyze the plays, the way they unfold, he can locate his teammates in difficult positions. He's not afraid to jump in on the rush when needed. And these are all qualities of an offensive puck-moving defenseman that I think will make him really strong and probably a Calder Trophy contender if he stays healthy and is able to play a full season. I have no doubt that he's going to make the roster out of camp, so I'm really confident in this kid's ability, and I think he's going to be a tremendous addition to the team, a team that did not do well scoring goals. They finished 29th in the league in goal scoring, and yet were on the cusp of making the playoffs. That's insane. It's worth mentioning that they did not make many significant changes to the team during this summer so far. They do still have a tad bit of cap space to work with if they need to make some mid-season moves, so that's always a comfort. And star defenseman Rasmus Andersson is rumored to be on the trading block as he enters the final year of his contract, so there could be a blockbuster in the works, and the Calgary Flames could still be in the market for making some big upgrades as the season goes on. But they are really banking on the roster that they had last year and hoping that that carries them this year, and I think it will. They had some key contract extensions to Morgan Frost, Kevin Ball, and Joel Hanley, so keeping the status quo there. And Morgan Frost is someone who kind of disappointed after being acquired by the Calgary Flames this season. He did not produce to the level that they had hoped or expected from a depth player, but Frost is a guy who can step up and contribute from lower in the lineup. He's capable of 19 goals. He's reached that mark at points in his career. He's capable of scoring 40 points. So if he can return to that form, that would be huge to get more contributions lower in the lineup. Of course, they're still relying really heavily on Nazem Kadri up front, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't see Kadri slowing down anytime soon. But a lot is really hanging on him to lead the way. So rounding out the roster with someone like Morgan Frost, if he can step up the way that the Flames need him to, is important. So they have this young rookie that's going to be really making a big splash on the blue line. They have Nazem Kadri leading the way up front. They're really holding steady with that offense. And for what it's worth, I don't think I really emphasized enough Zane Parek's contributions on the score sheet. This kid can rack up assists. He has a wicked shot. This kid is going to hit the score sheet often. So that is going to provide a big boost for the Flames, who once again really struggled to light the lamp during certain times of the season. One of the more exciting things that the Flames have in store is the goaltending. They have two very young goaltenders who are ready to carry the team. I mean, Dustin Wolf is still young, Calder Trophy candidate. He put the team on his back. And without Dustin Wolf, this team does not get as close to making the playoffs as they did in 2024-25. Wolf had phenomenal stats for a young guy. He put up a 2.64 goals against average and a .910 save percentage. He had a record of 29, 16, and 8. And he is ready to take on that heavy workload yet again this year. Now, the Flames did lose goaltender Dan Vladar, their backup, but I don't think that's a bad thing because they have a very viable replacement in Ivan Prosvetov. He's not really battle-tested in North America yet. Across 4 seasons, he hasn't played that many games. He's coming over from Russia, where he had phenomenal numbers with his club in Moscow. Prosvetov had a 2.32 goals against average, a .910 save percentage, and 4 shutouts en route to a 2016-2 record, and he performs really well in the KHL playoffs as well. I mean, this guy is 6'5". He has really tremendous reaction time and rebound control, which is really important. And again, he has not really been tested at the NHL level yet, but he has performed extremely well at the highest level in Russia. So I really have hope that Prosvetov will be able to seamlessly make the transition to being a full-time backup to Dustin Wolf. And with that 1-2 punch, if Prosvetov plays out the way that the Flames are hoping and needing him to, that's going to be huge. So I think Calgary is right in banking on the current group that they have, and I think that's going to get them far. And with small upgrades like adding a strong rookie in Zane Parek and strengthening that goaltending tandem with Prosvetov, I think those things could really be a difference maker. And Dustin Wolf is that guy. I really see him carrying this team once again, and I think he can carry them into the first, second round of the playoffs. So keep an eye on the Calgary Flames. I'm going to be really excited to watch them progress this season, and I think Flames fans should be very optimistic at what this team is going to be capable of. Finally, giving a little love to the Eastern Conference as well, keep an eye out on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, this one might be maybe a little bit controversial because the Blue Jackets haven't done that much this summer either. They're kind of in a similar boat to the Flames, where they missed the playoffs by a very small margin. They were just 2 points back of the Devils in the Metropolitan Division and 2 points back of the Canadiens for the wild card spot. And if they had gotten one more win, they actually would have had the tiebreaker over the Canadiens. So they were that close to the postseason. And I think there's a possibility that they cross that threshold this season for real. Something that kind of surprised me when I was doing research for this episode is that the Blue Jackets actually finished 8th in the league in terms of goals scored, but on the flip side, they finished with the 8th most goals allowed. They actually broke even in terms of goal differential. So the offense was there, but the defense was not. And the way they chose to go about upgrading the team was adding some more depth up front. They brought on Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood, who are both going to be middle to bottom 6 guys on the team, but they are capable of producing some depth scoring. Miles Wood is capable of scoring 15 goals in a season in his best form. He played some of his best hockey on the New Jersey Devils and hasn't performed to that high of a level since then with the Colorado Avalanche. However, Miles Wood can regularly contribute 25 to 30 points in a season, which is not a bad rate for someone playing on a fourth line. Meanwhile, Charlie Coyle, just 1 year ago in 2023-24, had a real breakout year where he scored 60 points and 25 goals. And then he kind of regressed a little bit again to more average form, which was 35 points in 2024-25. And that's probably more what you can expect out of Charlie Coyle. So he's probably gonna be floating in that middle six area. And luckily for the Blue Jackets, they didn't face many significant losses to the roster up front, especially. James Van Riemsdyk departed, but Charlie Coyle is a one-for-one replacement for him. Pretty much identical stats offensively this past year, so that has been a problem solved. Losing Van Riemsdyk isn't the end of the world anyways. The Blue Jackets are going to be taking a little bit of a risk in net, and they're going to be banking on their goaltender Jet Greaves to be the backup for Elvis Merzlikins. Now, Merzlikins did have a struggling season. They did trade away Tarasov, who was the backup this past year, and he showed promise, but he had some mixed results for the Blue Jackets. Jet Greaves got a little taste of NHL action, and he put up fantastic numbers in his brief time. He had a 7-2-2 record in 11 starts. He had a 1.91 goals against average and a 938 save percentage, and that is so encouraging in a young backup goaltender. Now, again, small sample size, you have to take that into consideration, and it's unrealistic to expect him to have the same wins percentage, the same sub-2 goals against average throughout the course of 25 to 30 starts, which he is expected to make. But that's huge because Merzlikins faltered in net at times this year, and had he performed a little bit stronger and had the Blue Jackets defense been a little bit more locked in and a little more shut down mentality there, the team would have been in the postseason, no questions asked. So with improved defense and with a reliable backup now, it might not be the biggest problem in the world if Merzlikins performs the same way. Now, they do want to see more out of him. Columbus needs stronger numbers out of their starting goaltender, right? But with Jet Greaves, that assurance is there that there is somebody that they can fall back on. But remember, Greaves is still really young. He still hasn't had a full NHL season under his belt. So they're banking a lot on this young guy, and I really do think it's going to pay off because he has such a bright future and he has shown so much promise in his brief NHL career so far. But really the main focus of this team is on the young stars up front like Kirill Marchenko and Kent Johnson. Marchenko is just 24, Johnson is just 22. They continue to lead the way offensively. They finished second and third in points on the team behind Zach Werenski, who deserves a look for the Norris Trophy. I mean, Werenski is phenomenal. He broke so many franchise records this past season. By the way, records that he previously set. He broke his own franchise records in goals, assists, and points. So this guy is leading the way, and the young guns up front are reason to be very optimistic for the Blue Jackets now and in the years down the line. You know, they brought back on the blue line, Ivan Provorov is back, and although he's kind of making an absurd amount of money, Provorov is a really great two-way, more defensive-minded defenseman who can still contribute, make those breakout passes, transition through the zones very cleanly. Provorov is huge, and they're going to be leaning on him a lot. He is a minute muncher, so to speak. He plays 23-24 minutes on average on a nightly basis. So they still have that defensive core in place of the offensive-minded puck mover, puck distributor in Zach Werenski, and the guy that can kind of hang back home a little bit more in Ivan Provorov. And up front as well, you have someone like Adam Fantilli, who had a fantastic season with 35 goals, 54 points. They're really feeling confident in their young group right now. As they should be. There is so much talent in that top six and on that top line, and all of these guys are 25 and under. So with the group that they currently have, with very few changes to the roster besides a couple of depth signings and that change in net, I think those upgrades are going to be enough to get them over the edge, so to speak, and clinch a playoff berth this year. Because again, had they gotten one more win at some point during the season, they would have won that tiebreaker. So as we get closer to puck drop on the opening of the 2025-26 season, keep these teams in mind. Don't sleep on them. We could really see some big progress from these teams, and I wouldn't be surprised if any one of them makes the playoffs, or all of them. But I'm really interested to hear your thoughts as well. Who do you think are the underdogs of this upcoming season? Let me know in the comments. I'm super curious to hear what people have to say. And if you disagree with my takes, I'd love to hear that too. I would love to have a conversation about what you think about the Ducks, the Flames, or the Blue Jackets, or all of the above. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the High Danger Hockey podcast. You can stay in touch with us on social media at High Danger Hockey on TikTok and Instagram, at High Danger Pod on X, and you can always tune in on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Once again, my name is Emma Miller. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.